I put out a poll on my YouTube. Who do you want to see on the next episode of How Good Are They Really? Over 3,000 of you voted, and here we are. Mariano. I don't know much about the guy, I'll be real, which I think is good. I have a blank slate. Over the past week or so, when people have been requesting for me to do videos, I'll hear random people giving random opinions about him, but I'm not somebody to just jump the gun just because other people have opinions. In fact, he's already a winner to that extent that people are talking about him so much. But let's ask the question, how good is he really? Because sometimes a lot of, as we saw on the last episode, I'm not going to say his name again because I don't want to be too harsh, but
I think my biggest achievement is having the most subscribers in the poker space.
Yeah, we'll give that. Oh, I'm sorry, Wolfgang. We're going to give that like a 3 out of 10. Sometimes you get these big content creators. They've gotten to these high stakes games. Other people will be looking at them like, whoa, they're playing for tens of thousands of dollars. They must be good. But they're not. They're not so good. They're like the 1-2 player at your local casino that happens to have a knack for editing and storytelling. So let's find out exactly how good Mariano is. Somebody did give me a good tip. They told me that I should probably not watch his private games because there's obviously incentive when he's on Hustler and all these things to play bananas, so he gets invited to more private games. So I'm watching an episode of him playing high stakes at the Wynn, one of the casinos I played at in Las Vegas. And we'll see how his thought process is when he's playing against some legit players in a legit player pool at stakes that are extremely high, 25, 50, 100. Let's get into it. And by the way, last thing, I hosted my first ever meetup game. It was crazy. I am about to host a week's worth of meetup games online for y'all that couldn't make it to London. And this will be any stakes. Like, we're going to be hosting a ton of stakes. I'll be dropping in and out of a bunch of them, getting on the table, talking. It's mostly going to be recreational players and punters. So if you're interested in joining, link in the description. There's a little form you have to fill out so we know a little bit more about you. And I look forward to it. Anyway, beautiful people, let's see how good is Mariano really. All right, we got Queen 10 suited.
10 of clubs from under the gun. I make it 300 to go and get called by a player in middle position and the big blind. 3 of us going to a flop of King 10 deuce with 2 spades out there. Big blind checks, and already we have a decision here. I think betting is okay, but since we're 3 ways and not even last to act, I'm not a huge fan of betting middle pair, so I decide to check it. Then the player behind me bet.
Okay. Not really saying anything there. Just said we could bet or check, but in a long way. But okay, we'll see.
It's $300. Big blind folds, and of course, I can't go anywhere just yet. So I make the call, and we see a very nice turn card. It's the 10 of diamonds, giving me 3 of a kind. Also,
so here's the question. Is he going to consider leading this turn? Because some people, they don't even consider it. It's actually a very good spot to lead, by the way. By leading, I mean taking the aggression back. That's what that means for the non-professionals out there. I forget that not everyone's a professional poker player, my bad. So usually people tend to play poker in flow, and we get taught that from like day one, check to the aggressor, check to the aggressor. And so it takes a while to kind of unwire that and kind of, you know, the rules just so then you can break it. And this is one of the situations you definitely have to break it.
Also introducing a second flush draw. I check it to him since he bet the flop. I'm obviously...
Oh, that's pretty bad. Did the exact thing that I said. Okay. It's not a great sign, but, you know, potentially there's a deeper thought process here happening.
Hoping he bets again, but instead he checks it back.
Yeah, so he's going to be checking back a ton, and this is one of the reasons why you want to be leading. We have loads of 10x once we check call the flop. And we can also be bluffing. We can also have ace jack and ace queen and queen jack and hands like this. If queen jack decide not to check raise the flop. We can have some spades that decide to check, and the 10 is just so good for us. You can lead just really chunky here. And the reason you can lead pretty big is that we have more 10x, and he doesn't really have many nutted hands. Meaning, what nutted hands can he have? He can have king 10, where we can't. He can't have kings. He can have deuces. That's kind of it. So we can actually just lead pretty big here, having it's called like a range advantage. If you really want to technical, it's called a nut advantage as well. And then we charge his draws and his king x. So he's going to be doing a lot of checking, which means we can actually do a lot of leading. The fact that Mariano didn't even consider this is a little bit of a red flag, but we'll see. Early days.
So we're off to a river, which is the 8 of clubs. Shouldn't really change anything, and it looks like I'm going to have to...
All right, so what I want to hear from Mariano before we get there is he should be thinking, how much will a king call? That's it. You want to get value from a king. That is it. Or you check raise versus king if you want to get real sneaky. Either one of those two will be fine.
Do my own betting here. It would be a disaster to try to trap and then he just checks back. Question is, how big do we want to bet? And I think an overbet is in order here, mainly because I'm either representing a super strong hand or some sort of bluff. When that's the case, I like a bigger size, so I decide $3,200 is the way.
Okay, I like the sizing. The thought process, not amazing, but in general, yeah. When you're polar like that, and you also need your opponent to be capped in those spots, you can be blasting overbets. They don't always need to be capped, but generally you overbet more when your opponent's capped. The sizing is great, but really you want to be doing some range analysis, like how much will the king call?
Go about double the pot size, hoping to put him in a tough spot with any king that he might have pot controlled the turn with. Sure enough, it looks like that's.
So this, sorry to pause so much, but this probably will have gone under most people's radars. That I want to put him in a tough spot with a king. That's actually a kind of aggregation or iteration of a GTO concept, which is like generally you find sizes that make your opponent's hands indifferent in a game theoretical tree. So when he's saying I want to put a king in a tough spot, that's a very GTO concept in a spot that doesn't call for it whatsoever, because you're playing against a human being. So you don't actually want to put a king in a tough spot. You want to make a king call. Like that's how this works. So get a little bit of a question mark there, but it's also like he's not going full GTO because he's not calculating combos of bluffs and then doing a ratio of bluff to value and then choosing his overbet sizing based on that. So it's a little bit hodgepodge so far.
That's what he's got because he thinks about it for quite some time before eventually calling. That's good news, and sure enough, Queen 10 of clubs is the winning hand. My opponent would tell me later on that he actually had King 8 of spades for top pair and a flush draw on the flop. Needless to say, we got pretty lucky there, but it's a good start to the session. In the next hand, the stand-up game is
It would have been a cool shove if the opponent used that hand to shove the river.
on. And just gonna pause here for a second to show you guys how beautiful are these stand-up game buttons. Knit game, sometimes it's called that depending where you're playing. It looks like they call it the knit game here. But anyway, I look down at
Mariano sounds like how I sounded yesterday after my meetup game. He sounds a little bit hungover in this voiceover, doesn't he?
at 4 deuce of clubs. There's a $400 double straddle on, and you're probably wondering, why is this hand in the video? Well, that's because I made it $1,200 to go. Of course, this is just a terrible hand, and you should probably never do this, but I am playing in a game where most of the players here are just here for a good time, and I want to be able to give some action back to these guys. So here I am with 4 high, making it $1,200 to go. There is the added incentive of the stand-up game, of course, but this is just a little too far. Anyway, only the double straddler calls, and we go to a flop of 995 with 1 club. He checks, and of course, I'm going to miss this board fairly often, but so is he, right? So I decided to bet $800. Would also do this with strong hands. Luckily, my opponent just folds, and we show 4 high to win our bounty button.
Okay, I guess this is called advertising. I guess he's just putting this in so he keeps getting invited back to private games. Yeah, obviously don't do anything close to this pre-flop. Oh, by the way, the King 8, the Queen 10 hand will rate that probably rate it a 5 out of 10. Just because the thought process wasn't there. He didn't consider leading the turn, especially. That's a big thing.
Not the most action ever, but I did want to show how I got rid of my knit button here. Anyway, in the next hand, the double straddle is on, and I look down at a much better hand, ace 7 of clubs. Now, if I'm going to be raising 4 deuce of clubs, ace 7 certainly qualifies. I make it 500 to go. Big blind makes the call, and then the double straddler decides to raise. He makes it $2,200 to go. Back to me, and of course, getting a good price with a playable hand. We're not going anywhere. It's just a question of raising or calling in position. I think calling is more standard. Occasionally getting frisky with a re-raise is probably not the worst thing ever, but this time I just keep it chill and make the call. Big blind folds, so we go heads up in position to a flop, which...
This really does depend on how deep the opponent is, which he hasn't added into the vlog. Maybe just a little bit lazy editing, but yeah, if your opponent is going to be like 20k deep, perfectly fine to call this. If he's going to be like 5k deep, you know, that's an easy fold.
Is above average. You could say it's 8-5-3 all clubs. That's right. We flop the stone cold nuts in a re-raised pot in position. stuff that dreams are made of.
All right. What I'm hoping is that he's going to be thinking, how do I extract the most value? What I'm worried I'll hear is, how do I balance my range and do what I would do if I had a bluff?
That's $1,400. I, of course, I'm not going to raise. I think if we were super deep, maybe you could consider it, but he's only got like $10,000 or $15,000 behind, so no need to get too aggressive just yet. I make the call, and we see a beautiful turn card. It's the Jack of Hearts. Shouldn't
So pre-flop's actually going to be kind of close.
Change anything at all, and it's not a scare card if he does have a strong hand. It looks like he's okay with it too, because he continues betting, this time $2,600. Now I guess you could
Cool.
raise, because even though we have pretty much an unbeatable hand, there are so many river cards that could slow down the action. You know, another jack, another club, maybe just a board pair. I don't know. I feel like raising here would be understandable, but I decided to gamble a little that the river will be clean as well and just make the call again. Really can't go wrong.
I think the main thing is that if you raise here, your hand just looks so strong, because what bluffs are you going to turn up with? You'd have to get really creative, like sixes with a club or something like that.
Here with either option, I think.
And nobody ever does that. So it just always looks like the nuts.
River, sure enough, is beautiful as well. The 6 of Hearts could not have asked for a better run out. And even better news is that my opponent does not slow down. He now
Mariano sounds so bored right now. Is he always like this, or have I just caught him on a hungover day?
That's $4,000. Of course, we are going to be raising, and since he only has like $6,000 or $7,000 behind, the only appropriate size is
live tail wise. When you do this and you know you're going to be raising, there's a little subtle thing you can be doing based on what kind of level of thought your opponent is, especially when they bet small. You can go to like make a minuscule action to be folding, and then look at it. Has to be like so subtle depending on what level of analysis your opponent's gonna be on. You can go for like a quick something to fold, and then look at the sizing and be like, and it has to be so, it can't be so obvious that you're doing this, but then look at the sizing, see he's bet small, and then have this like idea come to you that you're going to be shoving, like very subtle. It can't just be like a but it can be like a twitch of the hand, and then a little furrow of the brow. By the way, I'm releasing a live tail course. I've already released 6 episodes of it. I think by the time you see this, it'll be 6 or 7. You can get 30% off using the code that my editor is going to put right up on the screen, which I can never remember. I've been holding on to this information for a decade. I've never put out a course like this. I think it's the first of its kind. It is insanely good value. I've already had tons of people from the first 5 or 6 episodes say like, oh, I've used this already. It's already paid for itself with this. I've made a huge hero call using this. So I would really strongly recommend it. Live tails are the next generation's GTO. Get there first before other people do.
All in. My opponent, after I do this, snap calls. So that, of course, is good news. And sure enough, we are winning this pot versus pocket kings. We get a little bit lucky here. Unfortunately for him, that kings are cracked. Nearly 35,000 getting pushed our way. Of course, this is a very good start.
And he couldn't sound more enthused about it.
To the session, but you know what could make it even better? Pocket aces. In this next one, I am in the double straddle with 2 red aces. There's an early position raised to 600. Player from last hand with the kings once again puts in the re-raise pre-flop. He makes it 2,200. It's on me now, and facing
Am I just going to watch Mariano play the nuts? Because I kind of like that.
all this action. I think a trap is, interesting idea, but for the most part, keeping it standard with aces pre-flop is the route I usually advocate for. So that's what I'm going to go with here. I make it 8,000 to go. It's on me now.
You made it 8,000 with aces? What?
And
you playing $3 million deep, or what? If you just
all this
that's
action.
bad. That's not okay. That's not okay. Oh, by the way, the A7 of clubs is whatever. Pre-flop's probably a little bit dicey, but I mean, he had the nuts. He slow played it. Probably a fucking 10 out of 10. Congratulations.
I think a trap is, interesting idea.
8,000
for. So that's what I'm going to go with here. I make it 8,000 to go. Early
guys, you want your opponent to not fold something like ace queen, especially if it's a recreational player, which by the last hand it was. 8,000 is just too much, unless you're playing like billions of dollars deep. Like if you're playing something like 500 big blinds deep, then okay, you can go this big. But this in position 4-bet with aces. It's like the time to 4-bet pretty small, like 2.5x, like 5k.
Position raiser folds, but the big blind decides he's had enough. He's all in for around $12,000. Of course, I call, and just like that, we have a nearly $25,000 pot, all in pre-flop. My opponent asked to run it twice. I am usually just happy to let whoever I'm playing with choose how many times we run it. So we go off to 2 boards. First flop comes
That's the mindset of a professional that plays in private games. I know the feeling.
queen high, and he immediately turns over pocket queens. So we're probably not going to be winning this pot unless we find an ace on either the first turn or river. That's not the case, so now we're just trying to hang on in the second board, and we do. So we don't win the pot, but I guess it's always better than losing. In the next one, the straddle is on. There's an early position raised to $500, and I am next to act with 10-3 suited. Of course, these cards should just be returned to the dealer, but instead I make it $1,500 to go. If you guys are playing like 1-3, 2-5, 5-10, probably any game that's not private, this is just terrible. Absolutely do not do this. But like I said earlier, I'm in a game where I'm trying to give some action, and I've been winning a bunch of pots, getting dealt a bunch of good cards, perhaps feeling slightly guilty about it. So I decide to get in there with the
That is also the mindset of a pro that's been invited to private games. Okay.
10-3 suited. Unfortunately, the small blind and big blind make the cold call, and then the initial raiser calls as well. This is a prime example of why it's just an awful idea to play hands like these in a game where people are giving a lot of action. Is, you're just going to get multi-way spots.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't need to burn money. And obviously, if he's marketing himself for private games, whatever. Maybe we'll have to do another episode if you guys can recommend another Mariano episode where he takes it a little bit more seriously. But just as a theoretical thing, I will see loads of his thought process in here, and I will be able to tell you how good he is by the end of this video, no problem. But as a theoretical thing, if you want to loosen your range in these kind of spots, just loosen it in a linear fashion when you're 3-betting and doing these kind of things. If you want to see cheap flops of 10-3 suited, if you want to give action, sure. But just 3-bet like queen 10 offsuit, because then people are still calling their queen 2 suiteds and stuff like that. And you're giving action, but this linear 3-bet style means you're still having that kind of range advantage over people where you get top pair over a worse top pair or top pair over a second pair. When you do stuff like this and you just put loads of money in, you've got 10 high and everyone else has good hands or like better hands, it's just setting money on fire.
It's with junk, and that's never fun. But anyway, the 4 of us go to a board of jack 4-3, 2 hearts, 1 spade. Small blind decides he's just leading all in for a little less than $2,000, a short stack in this game. Other 2 players fold, and it's on me. I've got bottom pair. We're getting a really good price, and I guess that's all the excuse I need. I make the call, hoping we're up against a draw, or, maybe we have the best hand somehow.
Yeah, I mean, you priced in.
And sure enough, that's what it seems like, because my opponent says I'm on a draw. That, to me, sounds like a 3 is good, so we're looking for a clean run out. Jack of clubs is the turn. That looks safe to me. River, different story. It's the 6 of hearts. So we're now losing to 6-5. We're losing to any flush draw. And yeah, we get the bad news right away. He turns over ace deuce of hearts for a huge flop. He's got a straight draw and a flop.
I feel a little bit bored watching this. Do you guys feel a little bit bored watching this? Feels like it's not real poker. It's just like, hey, here's me punting, here's me doing this. I got to see insight into the queen 10. We'll see if we get some more.
I make it 500 on the button with 9-7 suited. Diamond variety this time. Big blind and limper make the call, so we go 3 ways to a flop of king, 4.
So we've isolated a limper to 500. I assume we're playing 5100 and without a straddle. Definitely completely fine. You can go a little bit smaller. You can overlimp depending on, if people are going to be calling too wide. You can even go bigger if you feel like you got fold equity doing it. But you do want to be having a good thought process about the sizing, even when you're playing in these kind of games. It should just be like imprinted into your brain. If I want fold equity, I go this size. If I want to just build a pot and go heads up, I go this size. If I want to go multi-way, I can do this. There needs to be a thought process about pre-flop sizing. Can't just be like a robot that hasn't had its wiring crossed recently.
With 1 diamond. They check it to me, and I think betting here is totally fine, but this time I decide to check it back, and we see another 4 on the turn. The 4.
I wouldn't recommend checking here, Evan. You're just going to have 2 snap folds so often, and you have a nice hand to be barreling. You just go a quarter pot. They might even start raising their king X, and then you just have an easy turn barrel. It's like, yeah, no. Don't do that.
Of clubs. Big blind now leads out for $900 rather quickly and aggressively, I guess, or at least that's what it seemed like to me.
Quick and aggressive $900 here means it's very likely not a king, and you can probably just end up calling and then raising river if your read is good enough. If your read's not that good, you can just raise turn. But there's like an interesting thing where if your read is really, really good, you can call knowing that he's very likely going to be bluffing the river as well, and then getting the extra 2 streets of value from it, and then just like min raise the river.
So after the limper folds, I start to get a weird idea in my head that maybe he's just trying to steal this pot. He could have a flush draw. He could just have like queen high or jack high. He could have ace high. All sorts of stuff that would...
He's talking a little bit like a fish, but that might be because he knows that his audience are not going to be professionals.
Just be leading out here. That isn't necessarily a full house, right? I mean, you can't just assign your opponent a full house every time they bet on a double paired board. That being said, even if I'm right, I only have...
So one of the main reasons of why it's really important to understand live tiles is that in this spot, imagine, you know, he puts out 900 aggressively and he's making it. Generally, when somebody has the nuts, and in this spot, he's only betting that size with a king or a 4, usually just a king, actually. They do anything they can not to be conspicuous or to be inconspicuous. So they don't want to do anything crazy. I actually made a ridiculous call, like first level of a 25K in Bahamas one time, literally all because some guy did a weird check on the flop. The guy was called Exitor, and I called him down with ace high for the whole $25,000 stack. It was a tournament, so a lot of big blinds in a 25K tournament. Literally just because I saw him do a weird check on the flop on Jack 7, and he had Queen 10. And my thought process is like, if he flop trips, he's not gonna just do this fucking weird jokey check. And it's the same kind of concept extrapolated there, where if somebody goes boom 900, that generally people don't want to be drawing that much attention to them with a king. So I'd probably if I'm that certain on it, just call and then raise river.
Have 9 high, which doesn't even beat most bluffs. So my solution to all this is this plan that I derived right on the spot. Not sure if it's a good one, but I figured I would call the turn bet here, essentially just a hopeless float, and then try to win it on the river somehow, either by improving to a 9 or a 7, or most likely betting myself, or even raising if he decides to continue what I think is this bluffing story he's trying to tell. So anyway, I'm in there with the call.
The nice thing about this as well is it's pretty hard for us to turn up with a bluff. Like name a bluff, you know? We really have to get creative with these specific types of like absolute nothing burgers. So even if he's got a 4, you can probably still rep a king and win the hand.
$900, 9 high. Not my best play ever, but those were my thoughts.
Actually, the best play of the entire video, so good job.
Thoughts real time. River comes the queen of clubs, and now he bets out $2,100, continuing to sell this story that he's got something. Well, I didn't call the turn just to give up on this river. I am going to go for the old hero bluff raise type thing. I'm not even sure.
All right, Mariano, we're back. I love it. I think this is, I think it's fantastic. We'll see the sizing.
If that's real, but it's on display here. I make it $6,100.
I like the sizing just in case the guy's got a 4. If you just min raise, he'll call a 4. But you can make it a size that you're actually going to make a 4 fold pretty often as well. So in general, I think, I mean, it depends on the recreational player. You might have to go bigger for some recreational players, but I think in general, this is a very, very good play. And I think I'm just going to rate this hand, apart from the flop check, I'm going to rate this hand like a 9.5 out of 10 for recognizing the live tell and for executing the strategy by, I don't know if the thought process was entirely there of like, I'm going to get an extra street of value on the river, but the fact that he's done this, I think is beautiful. I think it's really, really good creative poker.
Now, obviously the reason I'm raising is I think he doesn't have much. If I had ace high or maybe even jack high, I would contemplate a call, but since my hand is so weak, we have to re-bluff the bluff, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm going for it here. I make it $6,100. And now my opponent thinks about it for quite some time, which was surprising to me. I figured if he had...
Yeah, that is surprising. I guess he's got a 4 or some random queen that he's just punted on the river, but it sounds like a 4, I guess.
A full house, he would just snap call, and if he was bluffing, he would snap fold. Perhaps he's trying to save face. I'm not really sure what's going on, but in the end, he does end up folding. That, of course, is good news to me.
Nice at Mariano. Yeah, like I said, let's give that a 9 out of 10 just because the flop check's a little bit dicey and some other stuff maybe missing a little bit, but like really, really impressive stuff there.
I guess I should have said that I was playing the board on the river, right? Since it's kings and fours with a queen kicker. So I guess if he'd called, we probably would have chopped it. But anyway, we win this pot with pretty much.
Okay, that was kind of a fishy sentence. The guy's obviously not going to call with a chop.
Interesting hand. There's a middle position raise of 500, and I am in late position with 9-7 suited. Now this hand, in my opinion, isn't really strong enough to call when you don't even have ultimate last position. Plenty of players left to act behind me, so I think the best course of action is to fold or once in a while re-raise and try to get a heads up. So that's what I do this time. I make it 16.
The way he's talking makes me want to yawn. It can't always be like this. He's such a successful content creator.
$100 to go. Gets back around to the initial raiser, who now jams all in for around $4,000, a little more than a min raise. And yeah, this is kind of the problem with vlogging while you play. You know, I'm taking notes, I'm taking video, I'm trying to pay attention to a lot of things at once, and sometimes I miss critical details like stack sizes. Now, of course, if I'd known that he had $4,000 to start the hand.
Okay, so he punted, happens. He calls off. Let's see what happens.
But here we are.
Whatever.
I got to toss it. Goes. Comes a 5
Ah.
that we end up sucking out versus pocket queens. Can't deny that we're running hot today. Pot wasn't too big, but still more than welcome. And I guess this is kind of what happens. You know, you make mistakes by not paying attention, and then you get lucky. Yeah, poker is just unfair sometimes. Anyway,
I've been that guy that makes mistakes and gets lucky my entire career. So I'm not one to judge Mariano.
In the next hand, there's an early position open to $500. Middle position makes it $1,500, and I'm looking down at king queen offsuit on the button. Now, the player who made it 1,500, he's been pretty active, and I think he might be trying to go after some of these guys a little bit light. So, whereas normally I would just muck king queen offsuit given this situation, this time I decide to take the aggressive route myself. Try to take control of the hand, make it $3,700 to go. Back to early position.
I think I'm going to watch this and then I'll change the video and we'll start something maybe that is going to be taken a little bit more seriously. I mean, this is completely fine if the guy is really, really out of line. It's annoying not being able to see stack sizes. It's kind of annoying that he's speaking so lapsadaisically, whatever the word is. It's like just so it sounds like he doesn't really care. But yeah, this is completely fine. If the guy's going out of line, you can just way over 4-bet these types of spots. People in response are meant to be 5-bet jamming light and things like that. So you're really allowed to do these things. But yeah, we'll find something that he takes a little bit more seriously.
Position who folds, but then the middle position re-raiser makes the call. So we're off to a board of 10-8.
So instantly, as I'm going to tell you guys every single time when you're thinking about poker, when you see spots like this, you go, what is my opponent's range and what am I going to do about it? So let's assume the opponent is a little bit wider. He's a professional poker player. He's going to have again, we don't know stack sizes, which is kind of absurd. But let's imagine that we're all just like 200 bigs deep to begin. He's going to have hands like ace king, ace queen, probably only suited, maybe offsuit if the guy's a little bit crazy. Ace jack suited, maybe even ace 10 suited would be a little bit loose. He's going to have some traps with pocket aces. He's going to have queens, jacks, kings usually just rip it in. He's going to have kings, he's going to have queens, jacks, 10s, 9s. Some people like 3-betting 8s and 7s as well. 9s, 8, 7s, I always recommend flatting instead of 3-betting these positions, but other people start doing that. And that's kind of it. He might have the odd like king queen suited or something like that as well. But it's a very condensed range. And now the question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think the answer is when we have this type of hand, we probably start off with a c-bet. We get to win the hands probably on the turn more often than the flop. But if he does have ace king, if he does have ace queen, there's a lot of combinations of those types of hands, even though we block them both. We can make them fold at some point. If he does have ace jack of hearts, we need to make sure that we beat these hands at some point. So I don't think checking makes too much sense, just because then we can't really have aces and kings ourselves.
4 with one flush draw out there. Not really the best flop for me ever. We don't have much going on aside from 2 overs. So I decided to just check this one back when he checks it to me. Turn card, however, is an ace, which, of course, I don't actually connect with, but given the pre-flop action, I could certainly represent it.
We will get an insight into how good he is here. I guarantee it.
He checks it again, and instead of betting this card, I decided that I'm going to bet it on the river. Reason being is I would often check back hands like ace-5 suited or ace-3 suited on this turn. So I feel like, you know, I might pot control with a strong hand from time to time. And I'm going to do the same thing here with king high. Of course, I am not giving up on it by any means, but just delaying the bluff.
Interesting. I actually don't mind this. I mean, betting just makes a lot more sense. The reason that I think that I was pretty sure we were going to get a good insight is we were about to see what size he would go to make something like jacks fold, because you only need a very small bet to make pocket jacks fold in this spot because our range is so ace-x heavy. Really don't think that checking's particularly good. We do end up just getting bluffed on the river sometimes if he does have like a weakish hand. Even like a 10 might decide to bluff now. In pocket nines, things like this, and we can't do anything if he does that. And people like to hero call rivers much more than they like to hero call turns. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thought because we really like if he checks the river, we do just get to win the pot pretty often. But that being said, again, he can also check raise the river as a bluff. Like it's an interesting thought. It just there's not much depth to it, I think. And I think when you take the concept to its depth, you'll realize that it's not a particularly good play. But it's interesting that he decided to do that. But yeah, you just need to bet like a third pot here because it looks like we have ace king and we might as well like even quarter pot. Like people will fold jacks, people will fold jack 10 if you go a quarter pot here because it just looks like we always have ace king. When we 4-bet pre, we check the flop. There's zero bluffs in our range there, at least there really shouldn't be any bluffs. So you just bet a quarter, get like the smaller size that you need to bet to make pocket jacks fold or something like that, and then you lose less when he does happen to have ace king, ace queen himself.
Bluff aggression to the next street. We have position, so it's fine to do things like this once in a while. River is an offsuit 5, and my opponent checks it a third time. Well, we've gotten this far. We're not going to check back king high. Plenty of hands we could get folds from that are beating me if I check it back. So I decided to put in one flag, aka the $5,000.
Yeah, so this is what I was worried about. This is what you don't need to bet 5,000 to make the guy fold pocket jacks. Like you've made a creative line, which okay, it looks like we have ace 5 somehow. It looks like we have ace jack, something like that. You don't need to now start betting 5,000 to make somebody fold pocket jacks. They're just gonna fold it. You just need to bet like a third pot. Now you've just put more money in for the times that he does have a hand that is going to continue.
Chip here in Las Vegas. My opponent does not snap call, so it looks like he does not have an ace. After some time, it looks like he's a bit frustrated with the situation, which is kind of exactly what I was hoping for. You know, try to put him in a tough spot with a single pair type of holding. And it looks like he just cannot come up with enough bluffs. I don't really blame him. I might even go for some value here with hands like kings, queens, or jacks.
What? Okay, that's not a good sign for a thought process there. Generally, like obviously we've checked it down to the river. Like you would have heard from ace more often than not. But when ranges are this condensed and this strong, you can't start value betting hands like kings, queens, and jacks in this way. You just can't do it. There's just too much ace-x in everybody's range. The slow played sets, stuff like that. It would be disastrous to start value. I think this is probably a critical indication that Mariano's not at a certain level of poker because it doesn't take the hardest range analysis in the world to understand that you have very, very condensed ranges. So your value betting thresholds need to be absolutely adjusted.
After some time, my opponent reluctantly folds. So we get this one through. Not the biggest pot of the night, but always nice.
And he sounds overwhelmed with joy. Okay, I'll be right back. I'm going to find a better video where we can get a couple more hands, a little bit more insight into how he plays.
So he makes a 2,000. I've got pocket threes, like I said. I call, and Dennis defends his straddle. So we go 3 ways to a flop, which looks...
Okay, so we had a late position straddle. Small blind opens. We're in the low jack with 3s, which is going to be relatively late position. I think they're usually like 8-handed. We call. Everything's good. Everything's groovy. Yep, I like it.
Pretty great to me. It's ace 8-3. So we've got bottom set. However...
Henry's a reg, and they're playing high stakes. He's going to take this one seriously for sure.
Is a monotone flop. There are 3 hearts out there, so we are obviously losing to any flopped flushes and of course bigger sets. Aside from that though, we should be in great shape. Henry decides to continue betting. He makes it 2,500 now into two opponents.
You are indeed in great shape against all hands apart from all the ones that beat you. Agreed. Yep.
And already we have decision number one of the hand. Do we want to raise or do we want to call? For the most part, I think call is the standard play, especially multi-way. Even though our hand rates to be best more often than not, it looks like keeping...
You have to be against a real beluga whale to want to start raising these things, because you're kind of over-representing your hands three-way. Like when you raise it, you're meant to have a flush. But if you're against an absolute banana whale that's just going to go crazy with like queen jack offsuit with the heart, you're very much incentivized to raise and just be like, if you got a flush, you got a flush, enjoy my stack. But in general, people make some really, really big errors here. Mariano is very correct to say that you have to be kind of like taking it easy in these kind of situations, because when you almost never want to be over representing your value hands. So you know, if you're betting like you have a flush but you only have two pairs, something like that, it's almost never a good idea unless you're kind of on the level above that, and it's kind of the old school term was a range merge. But in general, yeah, just call in these situations. Don't inflate the pot so you don't lose your entire stack when they do have a flush.
Keeping players in and all bluffs available is the most profitable option. So I call, Dennis makes the call as well. So still three of us going to a turn, which looks all right to me. It's the 5 of clubs. The only hand that improves would be, for example, 4 deuce suited, and of course maybe pocket 5s with a heart, but both of those hands don't seem too likely, so I'm not super worried just yet. Henry slows down with a check. Now it's on me, and I think betting here is more than okay. Maybe checking once in a blue moon if Dennis is the type to bet a little too often might be okay, but I think betting is the better option. So I decide to throw in some money. I make it $5,500. Don't want to go too big here based on this board texture and the fact that it's multi-way. So right, 5.5.
So, I mean, correct. What I've not heard yet pretty much at all is range analysis. Like, here's my opponent's range. What am I targeting? What am I trying to get calls from? What size can I go that they will call? What's the biggest size I can go that, you know, ace 10 with the 10 of hearts is going to call? What's the biggest size I can go that the ace 10 of clubs is going to be calling? You know, these are the kind of thought processes that need to be going through your mind when you're playing these spots. It can't just be like, the ball texture is this, so I bet this. Maybe he is doing that, but I haven't heard it on a single hand yet.
5K into the middle. And this is where the hand starts to get interesting as Dennis thinks for a bit and raises it up to $20,000. Gets back around to Henry, who thinks for a bit and lets it go. I think this like
interesting spot. So your opponent's representing that he's got a flush. You know, maybe you can pause and decide what you would do here. The answer is you have to call, because if he's bluffing, you're winning. If he's got a flush, you can both up. There's absolutely nothing else you could do.
Likely indicates that he folded top pair, but I'm not going to weigh that too heavily. Anyway, back around to me, and well, we're super deep, and we have
that was a nice addition. Yeah, he's weighted towards top pair. Good analysis there.
Decision to make. Well, folding is out of the question with a hand this strong. Raising again doesn't make a lot of sense. We probably only get looked up by hands that are already ahead of me, so that leaves call as the only logical option. That's what I do, and we're off to a river. Wouldn't be mad if the board paired, but it does not. It's the 6 of spades. I check it now to Dennis, who was the aggressor on the turn.
The question is, what if it did pair? If it was like a 5 on the river, what would you do? And that's a really interesting spot, because it depends how bad your opponent is. If the opponent's really bad and they're definitely going to keep value betting like a small flush on the river, then for sure you can just check and then check shove. If your opponent's pretty good, you can actually start leading the river, because they are going to be checking behind a decent amount of their flushes if they're any good. Because again, condensed ranges, you have to find different value betting thresholds. If you're confused by what I'm saying, by the way, come check out eliteuniversity.com. I teach all this stuff. A bunch of the content is absolutely free, and we have a Discord that's hustling and bustling every single day, where you can ask your questions and your hands to a bunch of high stakes players that are part of the community. Would really recommend eliteuniversity.com. Apologies for the marketing. It's what I do. Because we've got to compete with all the big dogs, you know, upswing and running ones and things like that. We're building our way up.
And he gives it some thought before jamming all in for $130,000.
Nah, this is just a fold. I mean, you can get a live read first, and maybe if the guy's bananas, then. But everyone's range is so flush condensed that this is just a fold. So probably just has the nuts. But do try and get a live read first. I'll join getting a live read with you.
Into a pot that's 53K. quite the ridiculous bet size, 2.5, maybe a little extra, around 2.5 times the size of the pot. And this is just a nasty spot for bottom set. If you really think about it, it's quite the simple fold, I think. And the reason I say that is, well, there's two reasons. The main one is that when we're up against such a large bet size, we don't have to call with too many hands. It's okay to let some go here and there. And secondly, which I think...
Ooh, that's a GTO concept. When you're playing against this guy, GTO concepts have no business being inside of your skull. Like, you got to do a lobotomy and get those things out of there. So seriously, it's like a really, really bad sign.
Think is more important. This is actually the...
I want to do my minimum defense frequencies when I'm playing against this guy. No, you don't. You want to see if he's bluffing, and he's probably not bluffing.
Worst hand I would ever have after betting the turn. And
just to be clear, if you call pocket threes, and you've decided, like, your thought process should be, you've decided that he's bluffing, you should also call any ace. You should call anything, basically. Because having pocket threes, having a small flush, having an ace is almost precisely the same with a few blocker differences. But the blockers only make this much difference. But in this situation, the guy is either way over bluffing or way under bluffing. So you just call all of your hands or you fold all of your hands. Having like the, you know, we don't want to have a blocker in our hand if we have to call this. It's just absolute nonsensical bullshit.
And then calling a raise out of position. I likely wouldn't do that with any flush draw. I would probably only do that with sets and maybe like top two pair, but I would never have pocket aces and pocket eights given the pre-flop action. So really pocket threes is actually the worst hand I arrive at this river with and then face an all in with. So yeah, I think a fold is pretty clear. The thing is, it's Dennis, and this man is quite the maniac. He's down to go for it with bluffs, but he also likes to bet huge when he has strong hands. I've seen him do it plenty of times, and I think against a player like that, you just kind of have...
He does look pretty nervous. You would expect to nerves both value betting and bluffing. The guy does actually look pretty nervous.
To play logically, and what I mean by that is, in this situation, I could very easily have many flushes, king high flushes, even queen high flushes, and every other flush is probably okay to call with if he's got a bigger flush.
The best thing to do in this spot is start talking. And then the best thing, if you can get him to show one card, often people will make mistakes in these kind of situations. If they have a flush, they'll show like the king of hearts or something like that. Sorry, if they have a bluff, they'll show the king of hearts. And if they have a flush, they won't show anything. So you definitely like you hit them with the will you show if I fold? You know, that's a classic one if they haven't heard that before. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, come watch my lifetime masterclass. That works like a treat, like really powerful for some reason. That's just like one of the El Clasicos, but if you don't use it, you're missing out. But you just get them talking. There's a bunch of things that you can get very strong reads on in these kind of situations where people are just, you know, they're on a TV screen, they're playing for huge amounts. You definitely have to start talking to your opponents in these spots. If you don't, you're leaving money on the table. Even if you don't know what you're looking for, sometimes they just do something and you're like, oh wow, he definitely is bluffing. Or wow, he's so confident and calm.
So be it in that instance. But with just bottom set, not even a heart in my hand, kind of a non-decision, so I let this one go after a bit of thought. Unfortunately, this time...
He was looking nervous. Damn, dude. What a hand. Nice hand, Dennis.
Dennis does have a bluff. He's got king 7 offsuit with the king of hearts. So, pretty interesting hand. Unfortunately, it doesn't go our way, but I think I'm okay with how I played it. Just wanted to include this one in the vlog because it had quite a bit of traction online. A lot of people saying you have to call with a set, and they wanted to hear my thoughts. So
no, guys, if you're telling him that, unless you've got a reads, that none of you understand. Anyone who is saying that doesn't understand anything about poker. That's like theoretically the easiest fold you can possibly find. I imagine it is very frustrating for Mariano when most of his audience are like, this guy sucks. Like I've seen people talk about Mariano in my comments and how bad he is or how good he is and stuff like that. It is a little bit annoying probably for him when the vast majority of the people that are saying this like not even close to being like a 1-2 game in their local casino. And they're like, this guy should be doing this because I like poker with my buddies when I'm playing in Kentucky. Nothing wrong with Kentucky. I just use that as a random example. But, you know, he is still going to be way better than most of you at poker.
In the first hand, straddle is on, so we're playing 50, 100, 200, as was the case for most of the night. There's a raise from Texas Mike to $600. Vinny calls on the button. I don't know.
I really love Texas Mike. Texas Mike, if you watch this, I like you. I want to battle you someday. Maybe not, but I want to commentate in a game that you're playing or whatever it is. I think his style of poker is the most fun imaginable. Like, yeah, I watched him play the $1 Million Game. He's just, I like his energy. I like his aura. I don't know what it is.
Know anything about this player, and I once again look down at pocket threes. I make the call from the straddle, and we go 3 ways to a flop, which is quite nice and reminiscent of the previous hand. 6-3 deuce, 2 hearts out there. We've got middle set on a draw heavy board. Looks pretty great to me. But interesting developments already as I check to the preflop raiser, who is Texas Mike. He bets 1,000, and now Vinny.
Not considering leading here, also a little bit of question. It's definitely a good check, given that Texas Mike's relatively short. He's probably going to be oversea betting these spots, but again, not considering it is a little bit of a red flag, because this is definitely a spot you consider leading.
He raises on the button to 4,000. Back around to me, and
here you actually have a very interesting decision. What would you do? Pause the video and figure out what you would do. So the question is, are we trying to get more money out of Texas Mike if he doesn't have a very strong hand? And the answer is no. If he's got a strong hand, he'll go with it. If he doesn't have a strong hand, he will fold, because there's already 4,000. It's going to look really strong if we just call. So now we're really just focusing on Vinny, because again, if Texas Mike has aces, he's going all in off the stack size that he is. On this game, he's for sure doing it. But how do we maximize versus Vinny? We're playing very deep. We're playing a lot of big blinds deep. A lot of cojones is gonna go in the middle if we have a nice cooler here. Is he the kind of person that is just gonna stack off too wide with the type of hand that he has? Or if he has a big flush draw like Queen Jack of Hearts, Ace 7 of Hearts, something like that? Probably. And we're in great shape, even against like Ace 4 of Hearts. We're in great shape against those types of hands. So you probably just have to 3-bet here. And the more I think about it, the more obvious it is that you probably have to do that. If he's the kind of player to have 6-5 offsuit, he's also the kind of player probably to just go a little bit too bananas when he has something like A6, pocket 8s, 6-5, you know, things like this, and then flush draws for sure. So I'd probably make it around 13K.
And well, what do we want to do here? We're facing a raise and a re-raise. I think we're going to look strong no matter what I do, whether it's call or raise, but I think call is a bit better to allow Texas Mike in the pot as well. So I make the
big mistake. He didn't think that through at all, even in the voiceover afterwards. What are you allowing him in there with? It's not like, even if he has like ace king with the ace of hearts, which is like the best hand you can have that isn't a hand already, he's still just going to fold it. So like, he's not going to fold jacks. He's not going to fold nines. Look at his stack size. He's just going to be in there. So, this is a mistake.
Call. Texas Mike, however, gets out of the way, so we go heads up to a turn, which is the 7 of clubs. Shouldn't really change anything aside from, I guess, pocket 7.
Interesting spot. Would lead, by the way. Very creative lead. Not expecting Mariano to find it after everything that I've seen. When he, like the first hand that we watched, it was like a very easy lead to find. This is a very difficult one. But the reason is that we expect our opponent to be checking behind the turn a decent amount. We look strong. Even if he has a big flush draw, ace 8 of hearts, you know, something like that, there's a good chance that he checks behind the turn. We cannot give him free cards. And if he does have pocket 4s, pocket 5s, a 6, we can still get him to call. And we can still probably represent some bluffs ourselves, some flush draws, something like that. So yeah, I'm almost certain that he's not going to be leading here, but it would be a very sexy lead.
Now beats us, but I'm not too worried about it. I check expecting Vinny to continue betting, and he sure does. He puts in a bet of $10,000. Pretty big bet, around the size of the pot here. And we're out of position, so I think getting it in with a set wouldn't be the worst thing ever, but there are so many draws available, and of course we are losing to any potential.
Yeah, you just get it in here. You probably just meant to get it in here. It's really hard for him to turn up with. Like, he obviously has found a bluff that isn't a flush draw. It's actually really, really hard for him to find it. So he's representing a set, but it's very likely just going to be some kind of combo draw, some kind of flush draw when he's betting.
Potential flop straights that I think calling is a bit better. That allows him to bluff if he is bluffing on the river, and of course we don't bloat the pot if we're actually behind. So think for a bit and make the call, and we see the queen of diamonds on the river, a complete blank. I check it again, obviously planning to call any bet at this point, and that's exactly what ends up happening. Vinny tosses in $15,000. Should have probably jammed here just to try to get the max versus pocket twos or like 6-7, but I just snap call instead.
No, call's probably better at this point. So call on the river is good. I rate this hand, man. I think it's kind of easy to play the way that he played it, but I think I'm going to rate it like a 4. Just really not really thinking through the opponent's ranges and how to exploit them at all. We'll watch one more hand, and then I will give my analysis of how good is Mariano at poker.
Next, I look down at pocket kings in the big blind. There's a limp from Vinny ahead of me. Dylan makes it $1,200. Of course, I am going to be raising. I make it $5,200, and when it gets back around to Dylan, he makes the call on the button. So we're playing.
He does still sound a little bit bored. I don't know if this is a consistent thing, but it's two videos in a row now.
His pocket kings out of position, but no problem as we flop top set. Running hot today, 2 for 2 with the flop sets.
Guys, the guy runs like me. What is this?
It's King Jack 3 with 2 diamonds. The nice thing about this board is I would
always be the guy that says that you run good, by the way. The mentality of people that say that they run good, first of all, it's just more pleasant to exist in that realm. Maybe there's some manifestation things as well happening. Who knows? I'm not dressed like a hippie today, so I'm not allowed to believe in those things. But thirdly, it's just that it helps you stay positive. It helps you just have this idea that poker can be easy, and it helps you just find these, you know, when you're in the gray area, do I bluff, do I not? And you have this winner's attitude, it just helps you pull the trigger in the right spot. So always just recalibrate your mind and say, I'm the one that runs good. I am the lucky one. Just keep saying that over and over again. And it just, you embody, it's like a mantra. You embody that energy. You embody that saying the same thing over and over. It's like if you just say every day, I'm shit, I'm shit, I'm shit, you'll eventually start to believe it. And if you say, I'm lucky, I'm lucky, I'm lucky, you act as though you're a lucky person. Even if you're not changing something in the substratum fabric of the universe by saying it, you're at least psychologically bringing that into your existence.
Would often bet all my hands, and that includes all my trash hands, as I think Dylan knows. So I start with a small bet, expecting to get action. 3,200 into the middle, and sure enough, Dylan comes along. Turn card's a blank. It's the 5 of spades, and now we have a decision between continuing to bet or check.
Interesting. I'd probably check if the opponent's any level of aggressive, and I'd bet if the opponent's good. The reason for betting if your opponent's good is that they will find a lot of checks. You're essentially just trying to maximize versus flush draws and the odd bluffs as well, like the hand that he's got. But then if the opponent's good, he'll have a pretty good range, and he will probably end up just checking behind a lot of his flush draws and then realizing equity, and then you lose the pot against the flush if it hits, you know, things like that, and you don't really get them to bluff the river if they don't. But against these types of players, I'll probably hit the check button and just assume they're going to find a lot of just like random shoves if they have spades or if they have diamonds.
Checking and seeing if Dylan wants to put some chips in there. I think both options are fine. Probably bet is a little bit better. Something you should lean more towards when you just have strong hands. But this time I decide to check it. This is just a player dependent thing. I've noticed Dylan does like to bet often once I check it over to him and re-raise pots. We have a lot of playing history here, so I think switching it up between different strategies is definitely a good approach. So that's what I do. I check it, and now
the voiceover is not really teaching anybody poker. It's not really a real poker thought there. It's just saying words. Really don't know if I've just caught 2 videos in a row where he's a little bit tired. But that entire sentence was just, it was saying nothing. It was basically saying nothing.
now Dylan does put in a bet of $8,000. I take a look at his stack. He's got $16,000 behind, so not a lot left to play for if I were to call. Interesting spot now with the flop bet and then the turn check from me. I think calling one more time is probably standard, but check raising all in is also fine. Could do this with some bluffs like ace 5 suited, ace 4 suited, even ace 3 suited, maybe queen 10.
Important thing here is shoving is probably better than calling. Calling's fine. And then just call on literally every single river, depending how often you think your opponent's going to be turning up with hands like this, which is a wild hand to turn up with, by the way, pre-flop. Wait, was it? No, it was a 3-bet pot. No, it's completely fine, sorry. But yeah, just depending on how often you think they're going to be finding the bluffs, you can check call. But generally, check shove's going to be better. You get to take down the pot now, just a decent amount of time against some flush draws. You stop him from realizing equity and beating you with flush draws or straight draws. He's going to have a king decent amount of the time. The important thing is that you tank for ages, because if you want to represent a bluff here, it's not easy to bluff it. It's like if you have ace 5 diamonds here, you have to think for a while. So as annoying as it is for TV poker, you have to tank for like 45 seconds minimum here. Always be thinking about that for timing tells, reverse timing tells. Like if I had a bluff here, how long would I have to think about this? And don't just make everybody bored by sitting there for like an hour every single time you're playing poker. But just really like, because if you snap shove here, that my head is like zero bluffs. There's no way a bluff finds a snap shove here. And it's only value bets and easy value bets that will find the shove there.
And the nice thing about going all in, I think, is that it also commits him if he's got a king, of course, any sort of draw, like a diamond draw, or maybe queen 10 suited himself. But unfortunately, Dylan was bluffing with just a gut shot, which is probably the one hand that is not priced into call. And sure enough, after I go all in, he does let it go. He did think about it for a while, though, which I think is understandable. You know, I might be bluffing with a small flush draw. All
right. Okay. I'm not hugely impressed, I will say. Like, a decent amount of the plays he was making were fine and decent poker. I like that he's creative. I like that he is aggressive in certain spots and he goes with his reads, like the 9-7 on the king 4-4 board. Fantastic hand. A really, really good hand. I'm really not impressed with, like, he's just going to be getting annihilated by good pros. Like if he's playing against Garrett, for example, who I heard somebody say that he was trying to beat Garrett and like watched loads of Garrett's hands, he would just get destroyed, like absolutely destroyed, because the nuance isn't there for the actual understanding of the theory of poker. He's using some GTO-ish concepts, but it's kind of this faux GTO style which I see all over the town these days, where people, they learn the concepts and then they kind of implement them into the game, like minimum defense frequencies and things like that, but then they don't actually execute when because they just haven't studied the game trees or anything like that. And I'm not a GTO nerd. I'm not running sims all the time, but I've spoken to people and I've played against people for many years, so I see the lines and I understand why they take them. I can play what people call GTO if I want to, at least to a higher degree than the most, but it's just like he shouldn't be using these types of concepts in his thought process when playing against the people he's playing against. And then given that he's still misusing it because he doesn't know sizes, he doesn't know leading strategies, it's just a lot of things that are missing. Another thing that does annoy me is that maybe this is just me catching him on a bad day, but he doesn't sound too interested when he's doing it. But there's obviously reasons that he's become this hugely successful creator. So kudos to him. And I'm sure that I've just seen like a very small sample of videos. I'm sure that he's got like fantastic content. I've just not seen it myself. And the other thing is that I'm rating people based on how good somebody is to learn poker from. And he hasn't broken down a single hand in a good thought process. It's just been like, oh, I had this thought and I did this, or I did this and I thought this, and I had that and I kind of did that. There's no like clear, here's my thought process, here's where I'm breaking it down. So really I'm gonna have to put him below Brad and Corey on this one. Still above Wolfgang, because with all due respect to Wolfgang, he's just not good enough at poker to even copy. You can at least copy some of what Mariano does, but it's just not good educational content. I'm sure it's going to be like hugely entertaining for tons and tons and tons of people. He's been wildly successful. I'm so happy for him. He seems like a great guy. He seems humble. He seems chill. He seems like he's good action. He seems like he's thinking about how to make other people feel good at the table. But just in terms of poker, it was fine. Nothing impressive. But then, yeah, in terms of like educational content or somebody to look up to when trying to like learn poker yourself, I'm gonna have to put him below Corey and below Brad. Again, I'm only rating these people based on how good they are at learning from. This is up to you if you think if he's entertaining, up to you if you love him, up to you if you think he's fantastic poker or not. But this is just like, if I were you guys, and I know a lot of people just want to get better at poker, they just want to emulate, they just want to be like the people that are playing these high stakes. So many better people to be learning from him, in my opinion. If I'm watching this and I've just chosen 2 videos that are not representative of his entire library of content, please let me know and I'll do another one. Point me towards the video, because I do feel a little bit harsh saying all these things. But I'm here to be honest. I'm not just going to be like, oh, it's amazing, oh, I love that. I'm not going to be diplomatic about it. But yeah, There's just too many things that there's just like, oh, okay, that was fine. It was okay. You know, he gave an okay thought process. He used an okay-ish GTO concept, but there, yeah, not really a clear and concise. Like, I know Garrett, I've talked to Garrett, I know that if we break down hands, he'll have, if he wanted to, he wouldn't do it on streams and stuff like that, but if he wanted to break down hands, he'd be like very, very detailed, very, very concise about why he's doing certain things, and the execution is just marvelous. So I'm sure he's got a long career ahead of him, but for now, I think there's better people if you do want to be learning poker. But again, for entertainment, it's absolutely fine. Let me know who you want me to do next. Again, I'm feeling guilty like saying all of these things about somebody, but c'est la vie. It's what the content is. Rampage is another one that people really want to see. Let me know if you want to see that. We could even do some big people like Negranu, Doug Polk could be a funny one. We could do some other high stakes content creators. Patrick Antonius, I know him really well. I could probably get these people to call in, maybe not Doug, and tell me about some of their hands as well. That could be cool. Anyway, come join Elite University. It's free to join. EliteUniversity.com. Lifetime Masterclass, which I'm very excited to be sharing with you, and the meetup games online, which are going to be ridiculously soft, ridiculously fun. And there's links in the description for all three of those things. All the best, beautiful people. Peace.